What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the future of Starfield across various different updates we're about to go over. But before I dive into all that, it's important that I mention that the reason I'm able to bring you this information right as the embargo lifts is because Bethesda recently flew me out to their headquarters in Maryland, so I could participate in a presentation there, learn all this information firsthand and bring it back to you guys. Now, that said, important to mention that I did not play any of these updates. This was a hands-off presentation, and so much of the footage you're seeing has been provided by them, and I believe there was a digital presentation recently where they essentially did the same thing, just, online. But I think a lot of this stuff, combined with the game's prior updates, definitely give you what is likely to be the best version of Starfield out there. However, just straight away, to give it TLDR here, I definitely wouldn't call this a 2.0 update, as has been mentioned, and I really don't think this is going to move the needle for people who are just not interested in Starfield to begin with. But if it's a game you already enjoyed, or if you're just curious and jumping into it for the first time, I suppose this is likely something you would get something out of. Now, we've got a lot to cover, so let's hit the most important stuff first. So Starfield is coming to PlayStation 5 on April 7th, so just here in a couple of weeks. And what's more, that's actually coming with a base game price reduction. The base game will be $50 US, which would presumably bring the premium edition down to $80 US, but I don't have hard confirmation on that. On top of that price reduction and PS5 release, however, you're also going to, on April 7th, get the additional Free Lanes update alongside the Terran Armada DLC, which we're about to go over and discuss the details of. But before we jump into that bigger stuff, one smaller thing to mention. Roughly right around the time this update and video is releasing, you are also going to see a small update to the game today. That is going to be for things like the Trackers Alliance. So the Trackers Alliance has been in the game for some while. It is an old creation that was available. However, a lot of people at the time of its release were not necessarily happy with the price of that creation compared to the content it added, and so they are bringing an additional, I think it's 5 targets to that system. And the nice thing is that's free as well. If you have the Trackers Alliance creation already, you'll get that content for free, and the price isn't changing either. So if you buy it, I think it's 700 credits by default, it will then have all of this extra content they're about to add, which is just like extra targets and stuff to track down. But then the bulk of this, the Free Lanes update and the Terran Armada DLC. Now, they showed a lot of this stuff kind of intermingled, and the free update is the Free Lanes update, and the Terran Armada DLC is a paid $10 DLC that seems to be on the smaller side, with the gist of it being that systemic changes, like changes to how the space travel and stuff works that we're about to get into, that stuff is all Free Lanes update, whereas the asset creation and content additions is coming in the form of the Terran Armada DLC. Now, there is a ton of stuff to go over, so let's go ahead and do exactly that, starting with the changes to the ship navigation and travel. So straight away, small thing, there is a new camera angle added to third person. In specific, it is meant to allow you to see around the much larger ships you can potentially build, which I thought was nice, but the bigger news really is the cruise mode. The Free Lanes update brings cruise mode to the game, and what this does is effectively make travel through space more interesting as opposed to just fast traveling to the different planets and whatnot. So while out in space, cruise mode is something you toggle on or off, and while in that mode, you can see the planets in a given, I believe, solar system and lock on to them, or different locations available that you could potentially go to. And what the game will at that point do is sort of autopilot its way over there, traveling with you hurtling through space. Now, just so you're aware, if you come up on a location that you are not locked onto in this mode, what it will do is just kind of steer you around it. In order to drop out of this mode and into the sort of actual game reality where you can then, land and touch down on a planet, that kind of thing, you do need to be locked onto it. And doing that will drop you out of cruise mode and then, give you the opportunity to land there and explore and do whatever else in an attempt to make the space travel more interesting. Now, on top of that, it is possible to run into, I guess you'd call them random encounters as you do this, which includes the stuff that is already in the game, yes, but also some new ones as well. There will be a sort of alarm that pops up when you are about to encounter this stuff, and the reason that was necessary is because you're actually going to be able to fully explore your ship while that locked-on travel is happening. And the goal here is obviously just to make that system a bit more immersive overall and give you a little more of that space exploration feeling without just, fast traveling all over the place. Perhaps more interesting, though, realistically, I think, is the mechanical changes, so to speak, to some of the way the various game systems work, starting with X-Tech. X-Tech is of great interest to me because effectively it's a new resource that you will find when you are out exploring. It is meant to be relatively easy to find. Just through the course of your normal looting and rewards from the various places you are going, you should now find X-Tech. And the reason that you would want to use this is to allow you to upgrade your crafting. In particular, it allows you to upgrade the tiers of the items you have, including individual attributes for a given weapon, but the much more, I would say, useful thing that it will do for you is actually allow you to alter legendary effects. At a crafting station, in addition to the normal stuff, what X-Tech will allow you to do is effectively roll the legendary modifiers for the weapon that it could have. Now, the first couple of times you do this is in fact a roll of what is available. However, after so many of those, the game will just let you straight up choose which one you would like to have. And they also increased the amount of these legendary effects that can be on a weapon. The lower the tiers you go, that is to say the fourth legendary effect, it will just jump straight into letting you auto pick that given the, investment that you've put to get to that point. So not only can you upgrade the base weapon and the base level of it, but now you can just straight up fully customize the legendary effects. And I think that is especially interesting since they've been messing around with legendary weapons basically since Fallout 4 that have all these random effects. And this gives you a way to, in game at least, specifically tailor the weapon you are looking for with the effects you want, that kind of stuff. And so I'm very curious to see what people think of this system overall, because I do think that is a really interesting tweak to it that works for me at the very least, and yet plenty yet to go. So still out in space, you've got new ships to find, new equipment that you can put on ships that give you access to abilities they did not previously have, like stealth tech as an example. In addition to those new ship upgrades, however, another thing you can do is now build a module for your ship that gives you an extra upgrade route through the X-Tech. Not only can you upgrade your weapons with it, but you can get permanent upgrades to your ship setup that will just give you 10% bonuses to tons of different stuff in an effort to really make your ship as overpowered as you please. Then there is the outpost and settlement building of Starfield. So they've done quite a few different things here. They've added in some pets that can roam around your outpost. Yes, they've added some skins and things to help customize displays and the like, but nothing in the way of a sweeping overhaul. Perhaps the most interesting thing they did here was add in displays. So there are going to be collectible toys you can find throughout the game, and my understanding is that these are random drops. They're not in set locations, but these toys are effectively going to be like the Fallout bobbleheads. Finding them will give you a permanent buff based on what you found and everything, and then there are displays you can build for your settlements that you can pose these guys in. Again, very similar to the Fallout bobblehead system. Thought that was a nice little touch. But as you go and do all of that, you are bound to come across boundless things to keep track of and figure out, and that is where the new data tracking system comes from, or a big data repository where if you are, for instance, trying to track down a particular element that you need for crafting, you can go into this menu to find exactly where it is. It's also a place that will keep track of all of your different outposts and allow you to instantly fast travel to them, provided you can fast travel where you are, alongside a whole host of other systems that should, in theory, make it easier to find all this stuff. On top of that, if you are actually out and exploring and using these new systems and things, you can find new locations and places to explore upon the planets and things you can find. So a complaint that myself and many other people had with Starfield was that a lot of the points of interest that you could find in all the procedurally generated planets were not actually unique. A lot of them repeated over and over and over again. And to address that, they have increased the point of interest pool here. So you should see some new locations and stuff. And in fact, one of them comes with a new vehicle. This, in addition to the buggy we already had access to, we now have access to a second vehicle that you can drive around on planets. So there's that. Now, the rest of the updates for the Free Lanes part of this update is the Starborn powers. So technically getting into small spoiler territory here if you would like to skip ahead into the Terran Armada DLC part, if you just haven't played the main story of this game yet, I guess. But the Starborn powers are something you would unlock in the course of the main story of Starfield that in many ways are kind of like the Dragonborn powers from Skyrim, if we're all being honest, and yet they, with this update, aim to increase what you could do with them while also really leaning into the Starborn Fantasy and the New Game Plus cycles. So New Game Plus, as it stands now at least, wouldn't really allow you to take anything with you. You had to leave it all behind to jump into New Game Plus to see that new reality and change all of that. Well, that changes with this update. What you'll be able to do is find a schematic for a quantum entanglement system. You're going to build this quantum entanglement system, and it will allow you to carry forward items and things. So if you spend all that time and effort with X-Tech to make a really cool weapon, you can take it with you into your future stuff and allow you to power game to your heart's content. How much stuff you can take with you is based on a few different factors, but it is something you can increase and expand and allow you to metagame more and more. And to go along with that, something else that I believe it's like quantum essences, they call it, that are part of this new expansion to that system will allow you to do is power up your Starborn powers up to a maximum, I believe it's plus 10 was the number of New Game Plus cycles you could run through and find the variations of those powers over and over again to make them stronger. But now you can do that through this system as well, so you don't necessarily even have to run down the temples every single time. And then a couple of small additions to cap that off. We then have a couple of new crew members added, a little robot, as well as one of the popular people you could find in a tavern that people wanted to be a companion. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. I believe it's like Muria? That sounds right. And then last but not least, there is, if you dig hard enough, a big super mansion that you can buy as a bit of a credit sink, which is situated in an asteroid to fulfill all of your space layer needs. And then there is Terran Armada. So Terran Armada seems to be a relatively small but broad DLC that introduces mechanized robots to attack various parts of the galaxy via things they are calling incursions. There seems to be a small story attached to this, but basically these robots are going to invade, and the place they invade isn't going to let you like jump across space and everything with your grav drive, so you have to actually like get in there and deal with the incursion and drive them out to make sure people can travel through it safely and all that. Some of the new ships and things you'll be getting are associated with the Terran Armada, a lot of the new weapons, things like that. There's new characters, quests, systems, and rewards, as they put it with this. But I will say, when this DLC drops on the 7th, I will be reviewing it individually. It's not a particularly expensive one, but I do want to see where exactly the line of, let's say, demarcation is between the free Lanes update and what you are actually paying for with the DLC specifically. So if any of that seems confusing, I will have a DLC review for that in the future to hopefully clear some of that up. But as of right now, I would say that is the most important stuff to know with this particular update, and that should be dropping right as the embargo lifts, so there is that. However, I do want to point out that I did see a few other things while I was at Bethesda Game Studios. No, not The Elder Scrolls 6, don't ask. But some other stuff I want to make videos about. In particular, we had a presentation from some of their verified creators talking about the mods and stuff they were doing to expand Bethesda's game in that sort of official partnership situation, and I do want to talk a little bit about that separately in a different video. And then, not to spoil the video going up in like an hour, I suppose, but I did get the opportunity to interview Todd Howard as well, which was an interesting experience. So you'll see that very soon as well if you are interested. But as for this particular video, I do think that pretty well covers it for the most part. As I said at the beginning of this video, I do appreciate that if anything, a lot of this is a reduction in cost. Like if you already own the premium edition, you just get the Terran Armada DLC, you don't have to pay extra for it. The base game price reduction, it's going to be available to people on PlayStation for the first time. And you've got all these extra systems and enhanced approaches to various things that Starfield was already doing. And I think when you combine all that stuff, Starfield has not like fundamentally changed with any of these updates, but I do think it is, with these updates, a much better value overall. However, at that exact same time, I sincerely doubt this is going to draw in anybody who has already decided that Starfield is not for them. Although, as I learned in my interview with Todd Howard, this is not the end of Starfield either. They do have some stuff in the pipeline even beyond this, but obviously they're not ready to talk about all that just yet. But for today, I do think that is pretty much going to do it. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of all that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.